All right, we're recording. Week 3. I try really hard not to say the word "so" when I record because all my videos from like last year go so. It's really, I don't know. It's for me. It pisses me off. So listening to yourself, it's problematic. All right, so I did it again. We're in this project that I've shared with you guys. I haven't added anything. This is exactly how we left off last week. We're now moving on. Okay. And we're just going to talk about materials real quick, and then we're going to start building them and finding images and all that kind of stuff, okay? I opened up the wrong one. Funny me. We are... There we go. Give it just a second. So for those of you who are going to be working with the substance stuff, it is a plugin, and I'll show you how to turn it on eventually, but while we're waiting for my project to open up, you can go ahead and search for substance in the marketplace, and then it's this one by a company called Algorithmic, and then you can just install it to your engine. We're using engine 421, so install it to the engine, and then I'll tell you to turn on later on. But my project's open and ready to go. So we worked a little bit with lights, but obviously materials are a truly interesting and compelling thing inside the game engine. And we're going to start from scratch, all right? Everything about these materials is designed to be rendered in real time, and it might be a little bit different for people who are used to doing offline rendering techniques. Everything is called a physically based material, and that otherwise is known as a PBR material. Not to be confused with the beer, PBR, which will soon be releasing a whiskey, if anyone's interested. I put this in week 2 for you guys. All right. So we're going to create a material, keep everything organized in my contents folder, so contents, then assets, and then next to blueprints I can have materials and textures and all that kind of stuff. I'll make, I make a folder for materials. And then make a one called textures. So textures go in materials, they're combined to make these materials. I'm going to create one called, we talked about style guide last week. The style is to start off with a capital M underscore material underscore, and I'm just going to create a base color material. And I open it up. Now you guys saw it, right? I right clicked, and just there's a material just underneath where we did the class one from Tuesday. And this is another node-based editor. It's very similar looking to blueprints, but this one's all about colors and textures. Okay. Right here is the material node. When I select it in the center, I then have a bunch of details, just like we had in the right side of our blueprint, so we have it on the left side here. The material can have different domains. We'll get into that a little bit later, another day. The blend mode, is it a solid material? Does it have translucency? Can I see through it as like a window? Or is it masked? Masked means that some of it is 100% transparent and some of it is 100% opaque, right? So these are the 3 main ones you'll be working with. The one main note, and this will come up again and again today and next week, is that translucence is rendered weirdly in real time. And oftentimes what you guys think about, like wanting to have like a character that's kind of like a ghost and make it transparent, it actually renders it in a different pass and it looks really, really funky. We'll look at it this next week, but take note that translucency is very, very bad for optimization for augmented reality and virtual reality, and you often have to just deal with masked materials and opaque materials. So we're by default an opaque material that will take lighting. It's lit. The other one we're going to use today is the one called unlit. All right, so I want to have a base color, and the base color is, as we talked about last week, an R, a G, and a B, right? If I hold down the keyboard shortcut, if I hold down 3 and I click in the space, and it makes a node for me for doing a 3 input thing. It's a color input. It's also down here. You see that I have on the right side some constants. These are not parameters or constants, and they, if I hold down, you have a 1 constant, a 2, and a 3 is what I pressed. These things can also be dragged out like that. And just like blueprints, I can also right-click and find them. Okay? And in the same way, if I double-click on the black, I have this color picker just like I had before. Choose it. There we go. Plug it in. Save. Let's do a thing. I can preview it here on the left side. And my details panel, I can change things. And then, as you guys would expect, when I apply it to objects, it turns that color once the shaders compile. Essentially, what I'm also doing is just adding it right here to this material slot. Right? I can also select the material and just this little arrow, and it will say use selected asset from content browser. They will also apply it. Great. Makes sense, straightforward, but it's important to get to. Now let's change colors. I change colors. Boom. I save it. It has to figure it out. It has to render it. It has to do stuff. I'm not working in real time with color. I want to work in real time with color. That took 5 whole seconds. So I want to allocate resources to it. I want to tell the engine that I want to mess around with color in real time. If I right click on this object, at the very top, I can create a material instance. Remember how we were throwing out all the different blueprints last week? Right? Those actors, each one was an object of a class. Well, this is going to be objects of a class for materials. And I'm going to create one instance that is going to be called, oops, I was hitting the equal button. Base color, I'm going to say base red. And then I'm going to create another one that is blue. So these are now instances. Let's take a look at them real quick. I'm going to put the red one on instead. It's going to look exactly the same because it's just like a copy of it. By holding down Alt, I have a duplicate, and I'm going to make this one be the one that's blue. All right, but they're all instances of each other, so they're all the same thing. But what's cool now is I've told the engine, these lazy engines, I told you that they don't want to do things unless you tell them to. I want to make it look blue in real time, and I really want to finesse that without having to wait for it to compile. So this is what an instance looks like. It is much more simple, and it's only going to show me things that are parameters that can be changed. Okay? So what I need to do now is expose a parameter. If I come to this base color, the first one I made, and I right-click, I can convert it to a parameter. I'm just going to give it the name color. When I save it, this instance right here will update with that parameter. So this is our workflow. If we need to be able to change something in real time, we're going to then make that parameter inside of our base material, and then it's exposed for all the ones from before. In the same way with my lights that I had triggers for, I lifted up the base light, and then all the lights lifted up in space. This is the same idea of within the same kind of workflow that all real-time engines use. So by checking, I now have the ability to look at color, and let's come back in here to my project. Without even hitting play, I can now cycle through the colors in real time because I've allocated resources to it. You see how important this would be to see the colors when you're looking at the object versus looking in that graph editor view. And in the same way, I can be hitting play and I can come over to it and it's like, let's take a look at this. No, that won't do it all. Let's change it in real time. Right? And then you can really dial in these settings right on your object. So that's a huge concept to get used to, is base colors or base materials and the instances of them. Okay? You're setting yourself up for success later on. Say okay, I save. I wonder, will it stay? Yeah, so it stayed. So this is how we work with materials in real time. Okay. Let's take a look at a couple of other, I'm going to keep on building out of these things. Now, as I go through, I'm going to keep on updating those two instances that are side by side and allowing them to have different features. All right? Metallic, what does metallic do? It makes it look shiny. It makes it look have a metallic properties. Specular is the way light reflects off it. It adds those little white components to it, so it looks like it's overblown and blooming a little bit. Roughness is about smoothness. I can make it look like a what are those called? You play racquetball, like a racquetball, these rubber balls where it's really matte, or it can be shiny like a metallic object. And in fact, I can have fun with that by either bringing over a constant for 1, these are all 0 to 1, or I can do a shortcut and I can hold down S and click, and I have a scalar right there. I could type in metallic. Even simpler, I'm going to right click on metallic and say, make that a parameter. So now I just have it and it's already named for me. Let's make one for specular. Not that I have anything in mind, I just want to be able to look at it in real time and show you guys what it looks like. Roughness. And emissive. We'll hold off on emissive for a second. So when I save that, now, what would this orange one look like if it had no roughness? It was very, very smooth. So let's go to our instance, and look, there's all our parameters right there. All right? And I'm going to look at metallic, roughness, and specular. I said specular, there we go. And we're looking at the blue one. Let's make it a little bit darker color. That's fine. And now more metallic. Right? It looks like a car, right? It looks like an auto body kind of thing. Let's go back down a little bit. Again, these are 0 to 1. Let's do roughness. So really you can't tell it. Roughness and metallic I usually put together. So I have 1 for both of them. It's super shiny and super, or 1 for one of them, and 0, it's shiny and reflective. Right, so there's no roughness, it's completely smooth. But then if I get rid of metallic and I go into roughness and I do 1, it's going to look like a rubber ball. It's going to be very matte, but this color makes it kind of hard to see. You can actually see it better here with this sphere, or on your own computer. And then the specular one, I'm going to get rid of both these properties just so I see it by itself. And again, it's like I told you, it's like that white thing where when it's overblown, it just clips, right? It's how the sun and lights glint off it. You even saw it there, that specular highlight, that thing right there, which looks like absolute crap inside of VR. It just looks like it's pixelating. Anyway, cool. So now we understand parameters. We understand that we're going to start making these things happen in real time, just like we were doing with the door that opened up and whatever. We're going to make the colors ramp up and down in real time when we trigger them. Yeah.
So I found that incidentally my wall and my cube are linked together. Like one changed the color and the other.
Yeah. So if you're editing, so if the material is on 2 different objects, then it'll affect both those objects. So you'd want to actually put the one you don't want to affect. So you want to make a copy of the base material, or make an instance of it so that you're leaving the colors from the previous one. Does that make sense? Because if the same material is on 2 objects, it's going to make both objects change colors or change properties. Yeah. So, for instance, you change the color of this material that's on this wall right here, and it's also going to change the floor, right? Because they're both. If I look at the details panel on them, they have a material called cube material and cube material. So if I change cube material, all cube materials will change. Or they should change if I hit save. There it goes. Now it updated. So now I'm living inside of a giant blueberry, right? And if I don't want that, if I just want to change this one, then let's go back to that cube material. I might be able to undo. Yeah, I undo. That's previous color. Then One second. Just make it gray-ish for right now. What I would need to do is find out where this guy is so I can make a copy of him. All right, my world's back to being a boring gray world. This, if I want to find this material, I hit there's a little looking glass right there. It actually will jump to where that material is. It's the same thing as actually coming into the material and saying, where is that? Oh, browse. If I go up here to browse, I can find it. And this material is right here. It's called cube material. And I'm going to duplicate it by either copying and pasting, right-clicking and saying duplicate, or hitting Control W or something. Browse is right here. Or down here next to, it's really small to see on this screen because this is pretty far away, but there's two ways. Yeah. And so now I have a copy of it, and I can use like, oh, I love how they did a 0.7 for roughness. That's genius. I can utilize that and then just have one. I'm going to change colors too. And this is now my purple world. And then I have to apply it by dragging it on. Okay? Then just we'll have to do it, and that's what today is for, is doing stuff together so that we can just get used to the pipeline and the workflow. Cool? So the next thing I want to show is a little bit of transparency or opacity. What we'll do is we'll first of all look at just what a transparency value will get of us. We'll continue working with base color. Let's now work with emissive and transparent. Or sorry, translucent, my bad. A translucent object can no longer be metallic. Metals aren't. I'm sure some metals are. I don't know the whole periodic table. But in general, you could probably fudge things a million ways. We're going to do emissive color. I'm going to give it just a value. I'm going to hit S and do a scalar for emissive. I promise this will get fun in a second. I just have to cover the bases first. And opacity, which I'll just right-click and say promote to parameter. As I've been taking these parameters, as I've been creating them by right-clicking, they've just been by default giving the parameter of 0. If I have a 0 for translucency, my object is no longer there, right? It was actually a 1 before. In the details where it says default value, that's where I would say 1, so I can see it. And then when I go down here, did I save? Yes. If I go down here to this one, I can then make them available, and I can make it disappear slowly, right? Just like Michael J. Fox in Back to the Future. There we go. And then also in the same way, if I want to drive emissive, I can do this. Right? It's pretty cool. I'm just doing an emissive value. I didn't give it an emissive color, so it's just white. But it's really cool. One thing that Unreal does for you, though, that will get you guys frustrated when you do homework, is that it does auto exposure. It tries to make everything look good all the time. So if you're outside, it reduces the brightness. When you go inside, it's dark. It'll make it blow up. So if you want to have more control over that, maybe for right now, I just will show you in project settings. If I go to project settings and say all settings and say auto exposure, right here, I can turn it off. And if we're messing around with emissive, we don't want to do it because we want to be able to see it pulse and strobe. And if it's auto exposing, we can never tell it's happening. So we're just turning that off for our entire project. In there, it actually stays a little bit more constant. Cool. And I'm going to quickly add in my favorite component for talking about opacity, which is called a Fornell shader. Has anyone ever heard of a Fornell? What's Fornell?
Fornell is a type of lens which has a circular design to focus light in a certain way.
They're used in lighthouses. They're extremely flat, and when you're looking directly at them, you can't see them, and only when you turn them to the edge can you see them through the density. It used to be something that was incredibly hard to render in real time, and now it's something that's available for us, and it's just like, it's really cool. I want to show it to you guys. So it's called Fornell. It's spelled Fresnel, some person's name, I'm sure. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to give it a, we're going to work with opacity and color. So I'm going to create another color. Actually, let's create a new material to keep this clean. Assets, materials, and I'm going to create a material called M Fresnel base. And we'll just do a black and white one first of all. So because I'm not dealing with RGB, I'm just dealing with black and white, I can use scalar parameters. So I can say 1 and 1, or actually let's do scale. So I have base 1, and I have base 2. And then I'm going to have opacity 1 and opacity 2. And these two numbers are my the edge and the center. How transparent is the center and how opaque is the edge. We're going to do for now. All right, so we're doing two little groups, one for color and for one transparency. So another Fornell over here. And then we want to interpolate between the two, right? We want to have a gradient, right, between the two. And to interpolate, we want to do it linearly. We want to make it a consistent linear shift, and that's literally called linear interpolate, or LIRP. So linear interpolate, this is something you'll use constantly to change values of things gradually. So A is the first one, B is the second one, and the number that I'm changing is the alpha. That's that third number. So there's A and B, my two values. If I want to go from red to blue, I go from 0 to 1, it'll go from red to blue. Okay? Let's do the color first just to prove the linear interpolate works. I'm going to right click and create an instance for it. I'm just going to call it Fornell inst, or Fornell 1 inst, or whatever. And then because we're talking about something that's spherical, let's put in a giant sphere. It doesn't be giant. Big enough. There it is. Let's open up the instance. I have two values, and one is on the inside and one is on the outside. This is a Fornell. So you see it has that gradient between the center and the outside. It's a pretty cool material, right? Or I could switch it and I want to go the other way. I can make it so here it's kind of like dark on the outside and light on the inside. I'm going to do it the reverse, though. Because I think that looks really cool. Let's look up the other ones, the transparency. Okay? Let's close this out, clean up a little bit. Boom, boom. So let's do this one the same exact way. We're going to interpolate between two values using this Fornell idea. There's like whole games that just like have Fornells on everything because it just gives it a really nice soft edge to everything. So let's put it. That's the opposite of what I want to do. Undo 1 to 0. So now it's completely solid on the edge, and it's completely transparent in the center. So it looks kind of like a little bit more like a little orb, a little glass orb that I can see through, which is pretty cool. Can I convert this real quick? Let's see, convert. Let me jettison this. I'm using Alt and clicking to getting rid of these. And I'm going to create 2 color real quick. Constant called color 1. And another constant called color 2. Let's be able to jump in them, and I think purple looks really nice. A little darker, and then like a contrasting color, like a yellow in the center or on the edge. Cool. I think I want the flip. I want this one to be yellow, and this one to be purple. Cool. So you can adjust it as you like. So it's like the soft edged thing. And then all these numbers can also be changed. We'll make them a color exponential in. So the default value on these is actually 5. So we put back the 5 so we could see it first before you change it. And now I have the one for color, and we can just see that it changes where the gradient is. So like this is a very low gradient, and this is a much less gradient. You see that? This is just changing how the curve on the linear interpolate goes. I want to do the opposite. 0 to 1. So now I can see that it's less opaque and then completely transparent in the center. See, I basically made like a bubble there. Cool. So those are ones you can play around with. I always like to talk about Fornells. I'm going to save all. If you just use the save up here, it says save current. It only saves the one object. You want to save everything you've been working on, go down here to save all, or Control-Shift-S. Let's move into some interactivity real quick. We've changed materials. Oh, and just another quick one that we can throw away is that there's also, in this default material settings, if you scroll down a little bit further, there's one for wireframe, and it's just fun to add on sometimes. And material editor, you can also comment on things, and you can leave notes, and so now it's like rendering the wireframe only, which can be kind of fun, but maybe not the greatest one to do on a Fornell. So we want to do some actual textures now. We are going to look for a texture that can be repeated without finding seams on it, which could be called a seamless texture, or otherwise known as a tileable texture. And then we want to work for a certain resolution. Who here knows the resolutions you should be using for textures and this stuff? You guys have heard of like the powers of 2, right? So you have you want your textures to be square usually. This is more for older graphics processing, but this is still the standard. Is you want things to be powers of 2. You want it to be 512 by 512, 1024 by 1024, 2048 by 2048, 496 by 496, and then I think the most we can do in the game engines in real time is an 8K texture, right? So that's a 500, a 1K, a 2K, a 4K, and when you're searching for textures out in the wild world, now we know that like we want to look at rocks. So I say rocks, but I want to be tileable, and I will use the search parameters, the settings to, let's go into images, settings, tools, and say size. Where is that? Images, tools, texture. They've changed how this works. You used to be able to dial it in exactly. Google can't change on me. I didn't check that. Rock texture. Tools. Size. All right, they're changing on me. I'll just search for it. Rock, tileable texture, and we're going to search for 1024. So these are all these square textures, and these are built for seamless texturing. Let's go ahead and save image as. This is the first thing. This is a GIF image. I've never heard of that. Anyone ever heard of GIF? .jfif. The whole Google's changing on me, guys. This is a JPEG. Ah, thank God. Something I understand. Trying to make me feel old. All right, so I'm just call it rock. It looks like more like stone. I'll go to our project, and whenever I here's our project. Whenever I'm working on a project, I make a new folder to keep my assets all together, and I call it imports. And this is so I can always find my project. It goes in the version control too. Usually when I'm working on a model, I always use the same model I start with, and you just keep on re-importing it. That way you're not having to like re-put it back out in the scene a bunch of places. You just change what the engine's referencing, and it just propagates through. Again, it's about working smarter with this kind of workflow. So we have a raw texture. I could make another folder if I wanted to, but it's not essential. Now what I'm going to do is fire up this program called Bitmap to Material, otherwise called B2M. It's made by Substance, so we'll look at algorithmic. It's probably my desktop. Otherwise, I'll have to install real quick. So I had the page open. Come back. Substance, bitmap to material. Definitely been installed before. It uninstalled itself. Cool. So while it's installing, I'll import the texture into the program. No, I don't want to install. I want to use it. All right, we'll go for it. This is now it's an Adobe product, and we have to deal with updates, I guess. Cool. So if I go to our project, I can now make a folder called Textures, and I can bring in my rock texture. And if I say import, it'll look at my own project anyway. That's why I put the imports folder there, and I can say rock. And if I want to, I can right click on my rock texture and say just create a material. I'm organized. I want to move my rock material to my materials folder. Gives me the option to copy or move. I'm going to move it. And now I have a material. You can't select invisible, transparent things, so I have to tell it to allow me to select transparent things. And there I am. You don't know how long I looked on Google for that one. There we go, and there's my rock. Cool. So this is a seamless rock texture. But it doesn't really have that much information to it. It doesn't have that metallic. It doesn't have that specular. It doesn't have that what's called normals. And I want to actually use this bitmap to material to generate all that stuff automatically. I think it's quite a fantastic tool. And very quick and easy to get used to. Okay, so it says drop your bitmap here. Bitmap meaning texture. Find our project. Zoom tight. There you are. Imports. And there it is. And it is my main input. It is a regular color. Give it a second. It is already identifying what it's supposed to look like, and it's creating things like, this is ambient occlusion. This is like kind of the shadows that are already embedded in your objects. It's giving me a thing called normals. Normals are a red and green material that tell it how light reflects off of it, and it helps create a 3D kind of illusion without adding more geometry. It's already created all these different textures. Why it's not previewing it down here, I don't know, but I just upgraded, in the middle of the demo, so that's my fault. But I drug it in, and I'm just going to say export all these outputs. Yes, I want all these different ones. I'll do it as JPEG since everything else is JPEGs, but you can use something higher fidelity if you want. Go back to my project. Go to my rocks folder or whatever, and then just export all these. Hopefully it works. Close, minimize. And then this software just gave me all these other things I can plug in. So instead of using just colors and scalar parameters, I'm plugging in textures into this rock. Import. And now we have everything. The one thing I don't need is I don't need color. This program does a whole bunch for you. You can add like dust, it can add grunge, you can kind of create some other, you can do things that eliminate the ability for you to tell that it's a pattern. By default it said 512 by 512, gave me the smallest size. I could have changed that to make a high resolution. Let's plug it in real quick so we can look at our rock. If I open up my rock texture, this sample is going to not be lonely for much longer. We'll take those textures, and I only need a few of them. There's ambient occlusion. That's the base color. I'll bring that one in so they all match. There's normals. There's height, roughness. Looks like there's no information. I can always zoom in to see these a little better. I'm happy with this. Bring them in. And we're off to the races. If I'm not sure what it is, I can go over here and see what it's called. This is roughness. Roughness goes into roughness. This is normals. Normals go to normals. This one is my height. That is world position offset. This one's my base color. And as I said before, ambient occlusion is like embeds shadows in there. I hit save. And look at that. Let's bring the lighting down a little bit in this room. It's a little crazy. A little organizational thing. If I want to put everything in a folder, I can just shift select them all and say, go into a folder. And that way I can get it out of my way. Let's bring down this. I can also search for the word light. Much better, right? That's like a wet, glistening, specular, ambient occlusion texture, right? So this is how you can go out and you could take photos yourself on a day like today where it's gray and they're not going to get any shadows. You could take great shots and like high resolution, you know, with a great camera and make your own textures. And this kind of software will help you create tileable textures without seams. It'll help hide those edges. You can do it in Photoshop too, but this stuff is like super intuitive, and I think it's a great magic trick for creating great materials. All right, so I'm going to save all. Anyone have any questions so far? So let's do a slight bit of finessing. So what if you want this to actually, this looks like a huge texture. Like what if you want to have more, you want to scale it down a little bit, the texture on the object itself, right? Because if this object is going to grow, this texture no longer looks like it fits into the world, right? You'd feel like the cracks would be smaller or something like that as it got larger. So we have to scale the UVs, and we can add that into this material node for all of them so that we can scale them together. And this is a little trick that when I show people, everyone adds it to their little arsenal. So every one of these has a UV box. And if I hold down the U button and I click, I have UV texture coordinates. This is it's a red gradient by a green gradient, I do believe. I can mask it out and actually mask component. I'm going to mask out the channel so I can prove that this is two different single color gradients. So one of them is a red, right? This is the left to right is a red gradient. And the up and down is probably the green. This is starting to get into like a little bit of shader math, and when we get to particles, this is how you can create like infinite particles without actually using PNGs for things like textures, right? You can just use math to use for these gradients. But anyway, the texture coordinates are the tiling is 1-to-1, but it doesn't really have. It has like this doesn't have any parameters for me to adjust in real time, and I want to be able to scale it while I'm looking at it and really perfect it. So what we're going to do is, so it's a U and a V, right? UV means that U is up and V is lateral, but it's wherever you UV map it on the object. It's not really X and Y, because X and Y are defined by the world grid inside the space. My up and my lateral are going to move with the object or how I've UV'd that object. So I want to be able to adjust two coordinates that are just separated by, they're appended to each other. It's a U and a V, both are 1. So it's 1, 1. I'm going to create a scalar parameter for U size, and then one for V size. And as I said before, they're side by side. They are appended to each other. They're like an appendage of each other. So we're going to append them, and we've created basically a list. I'm going to do this again. And then I'm going to have a position. U position, V position. Okay? So when I am going to scale it, this number, I need to multiply it by 1. If I want to make it twice as big, I'm going to multiply it by 2, and it'll be twice as big, right? So it's a multiply. Multiply it. And then if I want to move it around, I want to add it. I want to add some numbers to it, and it makes it move it to the left and up and down to the right. So we're going to add this one. And then from here, let's go into UVs. That's totally the wrong texture sample. No, that's fine. Oh, and then I made them all 0 on accident, so sorry. Let's make them 1 and 1. Because we have to multiply 1 by a 1 to be 1. And again, you'll have this project so you can mess around with it. So let's make an instance of our material. We'll go use the magnifying glass to find it. And we'll make an instance of it so we can drive it in real time. Nothing's changed so far. So this will be position. If I move it to the right, it's going up and down, so I can rotate these things. All right? Rotate. And if I want to scale it, I got to scale it up. So I'm scaling it on the lateral. And on the vertical. So this is a really cool little trick, so you can really like dial in your settings. You're looking around and make sure things really fit the way you want to. Super useful for using like videos and all that kind of stuff. So it really just like fits into place. But as you guessed it, this can also go in real time and be interactive. These are such nonsense numbers now. You see how it's alphabetized these as well? That's a little disorganized for me. If I go over here to these parameters, I give it a group name. These are my size. And these are my position. And now this will be updated to have them separated out into little names. Positions together and sizes together. And that way I can like say, oh, I want them both to be the same size. And now we're starting from scratch. And let's move it to 0.5 and 0.5. So it's a much bigger rock. Or for me, I think this makes more sense if I make it a little smaller. Change it to 4. Right? That looks good to me. But you can kind of tell that it's tiled, right? There's ways of continuing to refine this, but this is good enough for proof of concept. Cool. There's our world of 2 spheres. And then, so what can we do to make this a little bit more fun? Is you can also take these textures and you can like pan them and rotate them. Let's see. Let us make a copy of this one so it doesn't get too complicated. I want to save this one for you. And this will be the panner rotator. Let's get rid of all this crap. Actually, get rid of all this crap. And if I say panner, I can then control click all these things and put it in my panner. And then I have 2 speeds together. And what happens if I hit 1 for X? So now we have like a sign that's rotating around or whatever. So these two numbers are just like my UVs. There's a vertical, horizontal, and a vertical, and in the same way, I can make a scalar for x. Oops. A scalar for x and a scalar for y. And then I'm going to append them together because they're like a list of things. Then if I make an instance of that, put it on here. Oh, what happened? What are we doing? Oh, well. Does it go the other way? This is that one. Does it go this way? No. Trying to be clever. I think it's because I hard-coded in zeros into textures. It's just, oops, let's do this real quick. U. Back to normal. Oh, I'm silly. This is supposed to go into speed. There you go. Love live demos. There we go. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna do a quick a trigger box that will make it start spinning, and then we now understand, or we can do one trigger box that makes it start glowing, and then we know interactivity with materials, and then we can spend the rest of the class like saying, wow, he just went through a whole bunch of stuff. That's too much in one class. You should slow down. All right. So here we go. Let's turn them off. Is that the instances on there? Great. So what we've created for our glossary term for the day is we've created a material instance. Remember, we have a material. We made an instance of the material. And now what we need to do is make it move at runtime or change at runtime. So now the term is called dynamic material instance. It sounds pretty highfalutin, but it just means that it is something that can be changed at runtime. We can make it start spinning and stop spinning. We're not just putting in and dialing in settings. What I'm doing with my mouse while it's playing, I want to be able to do that with like key presses or trigger boxes. So I am going to go into my level blueprint. And let's first of all make this one glow. Okay, we're gonna make it, use that timeline and make it go glow up and down, okay? Bring in a reference to the sphere, and we're gonna create a dynamic material instance. Somewhere. No, no, no. Create dynamic material instance. There we go. It said it is a specific thing to change at runtime during gameplay. Cool. And what's the material? The material for this one is going to be Fornell inst. So on my event begin play, and maybe we'll just stop at this one and move on so we can do questions. On my event begin play, when my project starts, I've made you dynamic, I've allocated resources to you, and I want to set a parameter. And that parameter is, survey says, emissive. Okay? So I'm going to add a scalar parameter from emissive called glow. And by default it's 1. Meaning it could be seen. And remember, emissive is the one that makes it bloom out and like get really bright, right? So we'll start at 1, which will look like nothing. It'll look the same. Now where are you going? Alright. I have glow. And what I want to do is make it do this. That's all. So we want to, remember we can set and get. We're setting transforms yesterday, we're setting the location, we were setting the visibility, we were setting different parameters, and all we want to do is set these scalar parameters. So set scalar parameter. This one. And then what's it called? It's called glow. And that's it. By default it's a 1, but we're going to say set it to 50. Actually, we don't need this. Set it to 50 when I overlap a trigger box here. As you remember, they're visible when I hit play, so let's make it visible. So when I walk in here, I want to make that one glow. Or it's not even going to do it ramp up, it's going to go boom, it's going to be bright. So with it selected, context sensitive, I'm going to make it context sensitive. I'm going to add that overlap. And it's going to make it glow. I can also say when I end overlap, go back to the way it was before. Oops. Do the opposite. Go back to 1. Let's see if this works. Everything looks good. Got a rock. Got a disco. Got a rolling square. Let's go over and see it get bright. And then when I leave, it goes back. So there's a lot of steps here, but I tried to make it, tried to define it as we went along, and definitely those definitions are for you. We've created material, and then we allocated resources in the engine to it to make it an instance so that we could change it and really tweak it. And then we want to do it real time at runtime in the game. We have to make it dynamic. It's a dynamic material instance. It sounds really technical, but it is what we're trying to do, which is make the light go on, light go off. light goes on, light goes off, right? So the same way we can send the value of 1 to the rotator, so when we hit that trigger box, it starts rotating. And then we leave, it stops rotating, right? So these are just these mechanics that I want you guys to try to do 3 of: materials, lights, colors, all these things for the homework. And I'm around we'll spend the rest of today. We still have 30 minutes for today. And then we got all weekend long. If you want to Slack me, we can work on this and make it happen. And you have this project that you can dissect, right? And then from here we can move on and start doing some more like narrative ideas and some really cool stuff. This is just really good core information for us to all be agreeing on. So with this, does anyone have any questions about things I didn't explain through the process? I'm sure everyone will get it when we review the stuff, but we'll just kind of dive into it. Anyone? So feel free to go for a break, go to the bathroom, or get a drink of water or something like that. And what I'm going to do is save this and then upload it to your Subversion. I know that 2 of you still don't have the Subversion. We'll get it for you. Save, save, save. And then find my project, which is right here. You go away. Interactive applications. Unreal project. Why is this not plugged into Subversion anymore? We'll figure that out in 1 second. I'll go ahead and stop the video so it doesn't go way too long.